You have made it really a hallmark of your administration to update our laws to take into account technology and just how people are, how things are very different today than they were 20 years ago. You've done this for ride sharing, you've done it for prop tech, fintech, you name it. The latest was licensing reform. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what inspired you to put so much time and effort into this activity?
Well, sure. I want to make Arizona the best place in the country to live, work, and play. And I often talk about having opportunity for all. We're having some discussion right now around opportunity zones. I think of the entire state as an opportunity zone. So I want to give a real shout out to Jen Daniels to win the best city in which to do business in a state like Arizona is a battle of the titans, because I don't know that we don't have an excellent city in which to do business. I'm looking at Mayor Mark Mitchell here. I mean, both these places are booming right now. So a lot of times people want to know what's going to happen 10 years into the future. Predictions are hard, especially about the future. So, yeah. Mark Twain said that. So I thought that what I do is what I know is not going to change, and that's low tax, light regulation, and places that are welcoming to business. And what we saw were these obstacles that were put in place that would block military spouses from relocating. Now, thankfully, the state was able to overcome that, and military spouses are very special people. But I think of all of our citizens, all of our taxpayers should have that same equality of opportunity. And I give a lot of credit to Warren Peterson on this. He was a real champion on this bill, and you pointed out some of the national publications in the Wall Street Journal. Last week, I was honored to be invited back to the White House in the cabinet room with the president and other governors. And I said to Warren, I think your ears must have been burning, because after the president shooed the press out of the room and wanted to know what do these other governors need to know to get something like this done, I said you need to find a champion like Warren Peterson to move this over the line, and credit to our legislature as well. This was bipartisan legislation, and in such a divided country and such a politically toxic environment, in Arizona we were able to get 90% of our legislation passed in last session in a bipartisan way. So I want to say to Speaker Bowers and President Fan and leaders Fernandez and Bradley, thanks for a great session.
If we can only take the show on the road to Washington, D.C. Diversity has been a real hallmark of your administration. I believe you've appointed more women to our court system than the last two governors. I believe the first two Latino members of the court, and I believe your recent appointment to the Arizona Corporation Commission with our friend Leah Marquez Peterson she may be the first Latina to ever serve in statewide office. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your approach when it comes to appointments and people of the Ducey administration or in the associated agencies?
Sure, Glenn, it's simple. We look for the best possible person for the position. So if that results in us appointing more justices or judges to the courts from the opposite party, more women to the court, more minorities to the court than anyone else in the last 10 years, the first statewide Latina, so be it. We're very proud of the quality of people, not only in the administration and on our team, but the people that we have across the board in state government. I think it's often lost and found in this very simple liberal or conservative discussion. But the state of Arizona has had more female governors than any other state in the country. How many female governors has the state of California or the state of Massachusetts had? You can Google it. And it's not only at the governor level or the statewide elected Latina level. It's across the board. I think we all remember the Fab Five. This is a place where people oftentimes come from around the country to call home and they find opportunity. And what I want to make certain is that we keep it that way, that we do not lose that. I always think that this is a state that is wide open, it's entrepreneurial. There's no good old boys club here or status quo or bureaucracy that should get in your way. And as governor, I want to be the chief proponent in clearing those obstacles.
And I completely agree that that's part of the secret sauce. You come from Ohio, I come from a different country, New York. You can make your way to...
Welcome to America.
Thank you. Thank you. I should have probably wound up in Florida, but I have a bad sense of direction, so I wound up here. We mentioned at the beginning the drought contingency plan, an extraordinary piece of work. Could you maybe talk a little bit about how you brought different parties together and how we wound up with, at the end of the day, something that passed almost unanimously and even moved through Congress in a bipartisan fashion?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. It's something that we're proud of. And I want to say thank you to legislative leadership. Could not have done it without Speaker Bowers and President Fan. And everyone came together on this. So to Charlene and David as well. Education's something we talk about every year in Arizona. Water's something we talk about every 40 years. The last time we did something this significant on water was the drought contingency plan in 1980. We're the only state of the 7 lower basin states that needs to do this through our legislature. So it's an additional challenge for Arizona, and we were being given a deadline and a date from the federal government. I mean, the federal government giving us deadlines and dates. But we were able to do it. We delivered at the state level. We were able to get it through Congress. Our state is growing right now. I mean, it's not only Gilbert and Tempe, but across the state. I mean, Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the country. That's 3 years running. And this isn't on a small base. If you take the greater Phoenix metropolitan area, this is 4.8 million people. This is larger than the 26 other American states. And we're in that category of growth. The state's the fourth fastest growing state in the nation. So this water is needed. It's necessary. This was a legislative reform. There will be structural and generational things that will follow. As governor, that will not happen in this second term, but the groundwork can be set and the framework can exist so that whoever follows can continue to grow a place of prosperity.
Well, I know that even immediately after it was signed, sealed, and delivered, including on the federal level, you continued with the work of the Governor's Augmentation Council. And I know that you were invited a few years ago to Israel to speak about Arizona's leadership in water. And you certainly delivered big time for the state of Arizona.
Yeah, that was a special trip. President Shimon Peres, may he rest in peace, actually kicked off that water technology conference, saying that Israel was the superpower of the world in water. And if Israel led the world in water, it was Arizona that was a close second. That was something that really meant a lot to me, because if you think of these things we can brag on in our state, it's because of the leaders that came before us that really paid attention to water and made sure with the generational projects, Hoover Dam, Roosevelt Dam, Central Arizona project, that we were put in a position where we could have this robust growth. And I think it's incumbent on us as leaders, even if we aren't able to see the fruits of that legislation or reform during our time in office, that it's people that came before us and really paid it forward. And we have that spirit here. This is a state that has been built by pioneers that oftentimes are at luncheons like this and will share their wisdom. And it's a state that continues to grow and develop. I think we can see these two different, more extreme directions in our country, and the direction that we want to continue to go in is that direction of opportunity.
Exciting thing to me is that there's a strong bipartisan group and business groups that are now aligned, and the work continues. Switching gears to the budget, You've made it very clear in your State of the State, and then you continued throughout the legislative session, the importance of really getting our rainy day fund at a very significant level. Can you maybe talk a little bit about why you felt that that was so important?
Well, this is the fifth budget that I have signed, and it is far and away the best budget I have signed. It's almost unbelievable for me to think that 4 years ago I came into office and we had a $1 billion deficit. Our education system was mired in these years-long lawsuits, and the economy was actually quite sluggish. And here we are, 4 years later, we have the largest surplus in the last decade in Arizona. Today, we have a $1 billion balance in our rainy day fund, and not only are we able to prepare for what's unexpected and inevitable, we're also paying down debt in the state of Arizona. We paid down $130 million in debt and over $1 billion in debt these past 4 years. This is while we've expanded investment in K-12 education, $4.7 billion, made certain that our teachers are going to receive their 20% pay increase. This budget, we were able to do things that were probably past due, like hire more Department of Public Safety officers, give our corrections officers a raise, widen I-17 for those of you that will be going to Flagstaff or Prescott this weekend. And so we were able to also make some real investments. And I appreciate you saying that it's my budget at the end of a legislative session is as long with the healthy debate that we had. This is our budget. This is the state of Arizona's budget. It's a budget that I think everyone in our legislature can be proud of. So again, I want to thank those that worked on these issues and always address. There's always going to be more to do. You're always dealing with scarce funds. But if somebody would have told me before I became governor which would be an easier budget session, the budget session with a $1 billion budget deficit or the budget session with a $1 billion surplus, I would have never thought it would have been the surplus session.
I still would prefer to deal with the surplus situation.
Me too.
Just to drill down a little bit on your, there were some skeptics maybe a year or two ago when you proposed the 20 by 20 plan, but year two, the installment was made, things were accelerated with additional assistance. How is that possible? How are we able to make those investments?
Very simple answer is growth in our economy. With a growing economy, and I'm speaking to a room of business people, so you understand that. When you have growth in revenues, you have a much nicer holiday party. If you've ever had a contraction in revenues, at Cold Stone Creamery, we had a holiday party at Peter Piper Pizza, and we had a holiday party at the Fairmont Princess. How do you think revenues were in those two contrasting years? And after the Fairmont Princess, I thought that we were maybe having a lack of humility in terms of how we got to where we are. We went back to Peter Piper Pizza the next year. And that's just a reminder that the business cycle expands and contracts. I can't predict the future. I got out of the prediction business in 2016. I actually could see a much better year next year and the year following than what we've experienced the last 2 years. But responsible leadership says that you should prepare for what's possible, what's unexpected. And today in Arizona, we're in a good spot, and I know we need more in K-12 education. We have another year to complete that 20% teacher pay raise. We were able to get dollars in addition to our teachers to counselors and cops on campus and expansion of new schools. And I think it was over $600 million new dollars that we were able to get into K-12 education. That's a result of us taking our medicine and actually tightening our belt 4 years ago, just like each of you do every year, living within your means and within your budget. The state has done that, and now the state's in a position not only where it's growing, but it's able to get raises to valued people that need it, invest in infrastructure and continued public safety.
And it's the people in this room who help make that possible. A growing economy allows for these types of things. And you can't paper over $600 million of new funding for K through 12. And that doesn't even include the additional dollars for the community colleges and the universities that were in this budget.
I think that's the other thing. We see not only a booming economy, but an economy that has more jobs available than people to fill them. 65% of the jobs that are available out there are in career and technical education, a class that when I was in high school we called SHOP. We were able to put millions of dollars into career and technical education, not only at the K-12 level, but also at the community college level, $6 million to Pima Community College on their aviation program. And I think things like investment in vocational training, removing these licenses, we're seeing 83% of the people that are accepting the waiver for people that are 200% or below on the federal poverty level going to aspiring nurses. So, more healthcare needs in a state that's growing, and you can see the marketplace and us removing the obstacles, allowing the hardworking citizens inside our state to pursue happiness in the way that they choose. And sometimes it's to be an aspiring nurse, and sometimes it's going to be an electrician or a welder, or to begin climbing that economic ladder.
What I love, and you've talked about this a number of times at different occasions, it's non-denominational. Wherever your talents and your desires will take you, this is the right state to be.
Yeah, if you want to wake up on Monday morning and go to work, God bless you. I mean, the government should not be getting in your way. There is more to do here. We have still takes, I think, 1,600 hours to receive a license to work in cosmetology. So you're talking about basically 40 weeks that you're asking someone to stay out of the marketplace. That level of investment and going into debt before they can go to work. There's got to be a better way on this. We want to continue to advance the ball, always protecting public health and public safety, but realizing where these regulatory regimes have been built up to stifle competition. I think with what we were able to do with universal recognition was to blow a big hole in the overly burdensome regulatory state that's unnecessary. It's something I think you're going to see 49 other governors and legislatures chase to follow, and they're welcome to do it. I mean, whenever you see a best practice or a good idea, that's the great thing about this position. You can give attribution when it's due, and when you can come up with your own homegrown common sense idea, even better.
When you look at this budget, it's incredible. You could talk about additional money for tourism, transportation. I mean, it really is a budget that moves the state forward. One also very important point in that budget was the tax conformity section, and our friends from the Tax Foundation looked at it and rated it as one of the very best because you did a few things really in a big way. It reduced the rates, and it also doubles the standard deduction. Can you talk a little bit about the tax conformity portion of the budget?
Well, I think when you talk football, you talk blocking and tackling. When you talk government, you talk taxing and spending. And I like to look at different historical parallels to see what was done in the past, what can you see in hindsight that could have been done differently. I think if you look at the 2002 time frame to 2009, you saw incredibly robust growth at the state level, but what you also saw was an increase in spending, and you saw tax cuts without tax reform. So we are certainly getting our financial house in order, paying down debt, putting money in the rainy day fund. But I wanted to take the opportunity to make sure that we were reforming our taxes, providing tax relief, simplifying our tax code. And because we do have so many needs across the board in our state, whether it's education, healthcare, public safety, that we were doing it in a way where we were simplifying taxes, continuing to allow the economy to grow, and allow that general fund to continue to grow. So you see the revenues continue to pour in, but Arizonans not only will have an easier time paying their taxes, they'll have a tax code that conforms with the federal code federal code. They'll have a deduction that matches the federal deduction, and we were able to do all of that while collapsing brackets from 5 brackets to 4 and doing it in a revenue neutral way.
Yeah, it was absolutely one of the best examples of a state meeting the opportunities of the federal tax cut and Jobs Act. Governor, we appreciate your extraordinary leadership. I know you've got a lot to do. I would just leave it if there's any additional comments you want to make, but it was our privilege to have a chance to recognize you today with our Milton Friedman Award.
Well, thank you again, Glenn. I want to say thanks to everyone that's involved in the chamber. I'm very grateful to have this position. I can see how quickly it's going now with 5 legislative sessions behind us. I just want you to know that we have no intention of slowing down. We have an incredible momentum in this state, and we are going to put our foot on the gas. What we have this summer and fall that we didn't have last summer and fall because we were somewhat preoccupied by a certain date in November is the time to work together with legislators and leaders across the board on good ideas and to make sure that we head into next January with the most action-oriented agenda that we've had in the last 5 years in Arizona, and I'm looking forward to working with the people in the room on making that happen. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Governor.